The opening scene bringing a whiplash of "Is this hentai?" and mecha suit mayhem. We're introduced to our main characters by only their first names. But clearly we're in desperate need of some setup. This is Hybrid and Heart, Magius Academy Ataraxia. Musou Gakuen HxH. Kizuna Hira is on his way to Ataraxia by the order of his sister Reiri. Ataraxia itself being a floating academy city, where we get a bit of world building on what the school is for. Another call from his sister ends up with Kizuna encountering Aine Chidori Gafuchi, who's kind of a bitch. Then the alarm sounds, which means enemy attack. Aine starts stripping down to her pilot suit and calls forth her mech, called a Hybrid Heart Gear, giving us the first fight scene of the series as the academy goes in full defense mode. The battle continues and Kizuna is almost blasted when the other two MCs show up for a brief rescue. In the battle overhead, Aine is losing power, so Kizuna decides to nut up and call his own special armor, which is, of course, called Eros, short for erotic. But it's not so glorious a save when Reini calls and instructs Kizuna to fondle her. But why? Well, Kizuna's armor is special, because of course it is. By engaging in lewd behavior, he can supercharge someone's hybrid gear. And of course he gets punched for it because what's an ecchi rom-com without trying to use violence as a crutch? Aine gets back into the fight and the three heroines are able to push back the invaders. Now it's time for proper world building. 15 years prior, interdimensional invaders showed up and BTFO'd every country. And this continued happening until Ataraxia was created to create weapons that could successfully destroy the invaders, these weapons becoming the hybrid gear. Reini basically shows the entire school what happened in the previous battle, and we're finally introduced to the second heroine, Hayuru Himekawa, prim and proper disciplinary councilwoman. This effectively puts a flashing neon sign on Kizuna as a pervert, so his school life is off to a start. Lucky for him, it's an ecchi rom-com, otherwise this would be a very bad beginning. The next morning, Aine has crawled into his bed. She's clearly after more of the Eros power. Hayuru also shows up and freaks out, starting a battle in his bedroom. Class is already buzzing with rumors and gossip of Eros Boy, which leads into the last main character's introduction, Eurytia Ferrandel. She acts very mature and caring, which makes her popular with everyone as a kind of big sister figure, even if she can be clumsy at times. But class isn't going to start yet, because Kizuna gets summoned by his sister for some more world building, complete with being given Sylvia Silcut as a subordinate. Finally, the MC team is sent out on their first mission together, and it seems like Eurytia pulls Kizuna away for a chat when the invaders show up. So it's time for the blonde bombshell to shine while the enemy divides to conquer. But of course, she runs out of power just in time for Kizuna to make it for a last-minute save. He tries to be manly, but instead we get a supercharge event, putting Eurytia back in action. Not only did they make it through the ambush, but now the blonde is clingy with Kizuna. I guess she really liked it. Next day at school, we're shown that the heroines have fans, and an impromptu date with Eurytia provides more character and world building, including an encounter with Hayuru, which is not lewd at all, even though it still triggers a supercharge. Now Kizuna's asking around about Aine because she's in need of some character building, which we do get along with awkward teenage antics, with Aine obsessed with feeling another supercharge. Girl's really chasing that high. But Kizuna turns out to be a bit of a romantic, so she doesn't get what she's after, at least for now. A call from Reini brings character building for Kizuna, and he takes the op to ask about Aine, which weirdly, Reini does drop what she knows. It's not a lot, but it's something. She also includes a bit of how the hybrid gear work, and that if any of their power drops to 0 while using it, the pilot will die. And so far, the only way to keep those numbers above 0 is Eros. Kizuna is quite literally the key to keeping everyone alive. Authored by Masamune Kuji, HxH was published as a novel from February 2014 to September 2019, concluding at 85 chapters. From June 2015 to January 2018, a manga drawn by Riku Ayakawa would publish to 28 chapters, and in the summer of 2016, the 12-episode anime would air, crafted by Production IMS, a studio that only lasted from 2013 to 2018, and crafted High School Fleet, Testament of Sister New Devil, Date A Live 2, Inari Konkon, and 100, which is very similar to HxH. So this anime tries to be several things. First and foremost, it's an ecchi rom-com, which makes sense for the time frame it came out. The 2010s were the golden era of ecchi, and everyone was trying to cash in on skirting the line between R+ and hentai. But H&H uses the pseudo-sci-fi setting of an interdimensional invasion as a vehicle for a world where the lewd makes sense. And in that sense, it works. There's no full explanation of how it works, but there is one for why, and the more the girls engage in eros, the more possessive and obsessed with Kizuna they become in accordance with their own personalities. The sci-fi aspect is actually really well realized, and in some ways, it's more of a treat than the ecchi moments. But the story itself isn't very strong, probably because it only got 12 episodes to tell its story, and a portion of that is pure gratuitous fan service. No surprise it wasn't received very well when it was aired, but while it's not a bad product, it's not a great one either. And it's definitely not one you'd name to someone who wasn't already deep in the ecchi genre. Elsewhere in that genre, though, a bit of deja vu, with a mech battle over an island in the middle of the ocean, starting off the series with some real octane. This is Infinite Stratos. But what's actually happening? Well, turning back the clock, we're shown a future fantasy city as a single boy sits in a class full of girls, all eyes trained on him. Maya Yamada, a teacher, drops some world building followed by class introductions starting with the single boy, Ichika Orimura. Then enters another teacher, his heavy-handed older sister Chifuyu, who seems to be important with how class fangirls all over her. Some more world building to explain what the IS mechs are and how they're used. It's fancy sports. Kind of a nice change of pace. And weirdly, possibly part of the design, it seems that usually only girls are able to operate the IS mechs, Ichika being the exception. Which is why he's now in an all-girls boarding school. It also turns out he's super famous because of it. He gets called out by his childhood friend Hoki Shinonono for a small scene before it's back to class. Then comes the next heroine of the series, Cecilia Alcott from Britain, a real self-absorbed noble lady type. Making it to the dorms, Ichika is rooming with Hoki, who's not very happy with it. Plenty of room for comedy though. Class the next day, Ichika is nominated for class rep, but Cecilia takes umbrage with it, which of course leads to an IS duel. But before that, we get more world building, mostly on what the IS is and Chika getting his own personal mech, which is a big deal. Also, apparently it's Hoki's older sister who builds them and controls the supply. And it seems like there's some personal drama between him and Hoki. Ichika seems like he's actually trying to reconnect with her, but she's just being a bitch. Only later giving us something of context to why she's being so hostile. Then comes the day of the duel. His mech is delivered and he can feel something special with it, but with no time to practice, Ichika has to adapt during the fight, with his IS shifting right at the last moment to save his skin from a loss. A mere moment before landing his own hit that would have won the fight, Ichika loses, by accident of not knowing how his IS actually works. But that gets explained to us immediately after. And not only does Hoki seem to be warming back up to him, but it seems something also changed in Cecilia. Basic training the next day goes sideways, and it's Cecilia who seems to be most concerned for Ichika's well-being. It looks like his protagonist's powers are on full throttle, as he's already got a love triangle brewing. Also, Cecilia decided to let Ichika be the class rep anyway, making the entire duel basically pointless. And that's when the next heroine makes her entrance. Ling Yin Huang from China, another childhood friend of Ichika's from middle school. This ends up with backstory of how Ichika ended up in the IS Academy in the first place. Also because this is a harem series, Lin is also in love with Ichika, going so far as to try and swap rooms with Hoki. This leads into a fight against her. She's got some CQC and some fancy arm cannons. But their match is interrupted when a shot breaks through the arena's shield. Someone is attacking. It's a mech unlike the IS suits. The unknown mech did something that locked all the doors to the arena, making escape or assistance impossible. During the fight, Ichika had a thought. This might be a UAV. No pilot. Though during the strategy talk, Hoki finds a way out and draws attention of the mech, leading to Ichika managing to sever one of its arms in time for Cecilia to snipe the bot. But a last strike by the mech leaves Ichika in the infirmary. There's some dorm drama with Hoki getting moved, and she wants to go on a date with Ichika. This turns into gossip with yet another MC introduction. Charles Dunois, French, a second male IS pilot. Cue the girls losing it again, but you probably already picked up something weird about Charles. He's oddly feminine. Not hard to figure out why. On the field, HxH gets a lucky Lecture moment thanks to Maya, complete with angry harem reactions. Another battle, Maya versus Cecilia and Lynn, with some IS world building by Charles. Goes as you'd expect. The kids get schooled. The next day, yet another transfer student shows up, this time from Germany, Lara Bodwig, with her being the last of the main characters to be introduced. She's immediately hostile to HxH because she's a massive fangirl of Chifuyu's. She comes around though. Authored by Izuru Yumizuru, Infinite Stratos began publishing as a novel in 2009, and sits at 12 volumes still publishing. It got 2 manga adaptations, with one by Kenji Akaboshi from May 2010 to July 2012, completed 26 chapters, and the other by Homura Yuki, publishing from May 2013 to February 2020, complete with 41 chapters. But it would be the winter of 2011 when the anime would begin airing, with 2 seasons of 12 episodes each, with the second season airing in the fall of 2013. Both seasons crafted by 8-Bit. The same studio to craft Tensura, the later seasons of Irregular at Magic High, Blue Lock, Eden of Grisaya, and both seasons of Shy. IS does several things better than HxH, one of which is the setting. It doesn't start with some kind of little explained conflict against an unidentified enemy. I mean, it kinda does with the opening scene, but in the show's defense, that's from like the finale of the season. And it really is a nice opener because it shows you exactly how fast-paced and technical the show gets with its mech fights. But by story, the IS suits themselves went from weapons to sporting equipment, all based on geopolitics. The latter context provides an easier opening and more room for setup and world building, spreading character introductions across 6 episodes. It really gives you time to absorb the world and appreciate the story, light as it is in the beginning. And another thing it does very well is the combat segments. For early 2010 CG, the characters move smooth and fit into the world in a convincing way. With an emphasis on both the speed and intensity of the fights, it's far from boring. But probably the biggest thing it has over HxH is that it doesn't lean too far into the ecchi. HxH skirts the line with being softcore, while IS has plenty of fan service but doesn't take it so far as to carry on to the point of awkwardness. IS did end up rating a bit higher than HxH and even got a second season, so the quality comparison and market target speaks for itself. But why even talk about these 2 series in the first place? Because ecchi, erotica, and now horror are under attack. They have been longer than most normies even realize, and only now are they waking up to who is trying to control the culture through speech. Visa and MasterCard have long been enemies of the entertainment market, with the majority shareholders, BlackRock and Vanguard, openly stating that they want to control and shape culture. And they've been doing that by threatening to pull payment services to companies that don't comply with their bullshit TOS, which they shouldn't even be allowed to have in the first place. Their most recent victims being Subscribestar, who found a bit of a workaround but didn't exactly push back. Which is kind of weird because Subscribestar was supposed to be an alternative to Patreon who was already censoring creators for such content. Doki Doki Literature Club, which is not loot at all, it's a horror visual novel, it got pulled from the Google Play Store. And the site Faku has been targeted by the payment processors but is fighting back in court, which is a good sign for us, but we don't have an outcome for that yet. And what makes it worse is there are no laws to prevent payment processors from strong-arming companies into compliance. No alternative system of payment is mainstream enough to matter yet, and no laws to punish the payment processors have been passed. So, quietly, in the background, our speech is being censored without any way to fight back. And it starts with denying you booba. I am the NBT. This has been the Noble Weeaboo. Like or don't, sub or don't, and thank you for watching. HxH is mid at best. IS is definitely good and worth a watch. And while we may not be getting any more top tier ecchi for the foreseeable future because of payment processor mafia tactics, we can at least return to the ones that have already aired and find comfort that they can't take away series that have already been shown. The internet will always have them, and will always have ways to find them.